Over 500 dead, and not one ever saw the man who did it. His name was Simo Häyhä, one Finnish farmer, no scope, against an army of nearly 500,000. At the Kolar front, Soviet soldiers are dying in the snow, and nobody can figure out where the shots are coming from. No muzzle flash, no sound that carries far enough to track. Just men dropping in open ground, one after another, while the tree line sits perfectly still. Finnish command is getting field reports that a single shooter has all but shut down a stretch of the line by himself. Soviet units won't cross open ground where he's working. The one Finnish farmer they cannot see is killing them one at a time. So how does a farmer from a small village near the Soviet border become one of the most lethal snipers in recorded history without ever using a scope? Simo Häyhä grew up in Rautjärvi, a small farming community close enough to the Soviet border that the forests around it weren't abstract. He worked the land, hunted through the winters, and spent years moving quietly through the same terrain the Red Army would later try to push through. He joined the Civil Guard at 17, completed 15 months of military service, competed seriously in shooting events, and went through sniper training in 1938. By the time the war started, he was a decorated marksman who happened to farm in civilian life. He knew his ground the way most people know their own house. When the Soviet Union crossed Finland's border in November 1939, the scale of the invasion was staggering. The Winter War began just 3 months after Nazi Germany invaded Poland, triggering World War II. Roughly 450,000 Red Army troops moved in against a Finnish force of around 300,000, and Soviet commanders expected the whole thing to be finished in a matter of weeks. Finland didn't have the manpower, the equipment, or the strategic depth to absorb a sustained push. What it had was terrain, winter, and men who understood both. Commander-in-Chief Carl Gustaf Mannerheim sent Häyhä to the Kolar River sector, one of the most exposed and thinly held positions on the entire front. The Finns defending it were spread so thin that losing ground there wasn't just a tactical problem, it was a critical one. If the Kolar line broke, the Soviet advance would tear through the Finnish flank north of Lake Ladoga and unravel the entire defensive line in the region. The men holding it knew that. Häyhä knew that. His rifle was a Finnish-made M2830, a variant of the Mosin Nagant. Bolt action, no frills, iron sights. He didn't modify it into something exotic. He used it the way it came, the way he'd always used rifles. Carefully, patiently, with the confidence of someone who'd been shooting since boyhood. Long before the first Soviet patrol of the day moved forward, he was already in position, and he stayed there until the light died. The killing began immediately. Why didn't he use a scope? It sounds like a disadvantage. At normal temperatures it might be, but in Finland in December, with temperatures dropping to -40, a scope becomes a liability faster than it becomes a tool. At that temperature, optics fog badly in extreme cold, and a scope's glass catches ambient light in a way that iron sights simply don't. A faint glint, a small reflection, but enough for a trained eye to find you. Häyhä understood that being invisible was more valuable than magnification, so he used iron sights, stayed low, and traded range for concealment. He knew his terrain well enough that the distance didn't matter the way it would have for someone dropped into unfamiliar ground. He was in position before sunrise, sometimes hours before the light came up, so there was no movement left to detect when Soviet patrols pushed into range. Movement is what gets a sniper found, and Häyhä had already finished moving long before anyone was looking. The snow nest he built in front of his position wasn't improvised shelter. He packed snow by hand into a low berm that functioned as a rifle rest and broke his silhouette against the terrain behind him. That berm did something else too. It absorbed the small puff of displaced snow that a muzzle blast kicks up, cutting one more visible tell. From the front, he wasn't a man in the snow. He was part of the snow, his white suit blurring whatever edge remained. The whole setup ran on one rule: if you can't be seen, you can't be targeted. At -40, exhaled air produces a visible vapor cloud above your position. For a sniper trying to disappear, that's the same as waving a flag. He was said to hold snow in his mouth before he fired, keeping his breath cold enough that the vapor didn't rise. It's a small thing. It's also the kind of small thing that explains why men died without anyone finding the source of the shot. His rate of fire was disciplined in a way that confused Soviet units. He wasn't cycling the bolt as fast as he could pull it. He picked a target, fired once, and went completely still. Multiple kills in a single engagement, with Soviet soldiers unable to pinpoint the direction the rounds were coming from, even after several men went down. The shot would land, and then there was nothing. No return fire to run from, no position to call in, no second movement in the trees. Just the result and the silence, and the next man trying to decide whether to move. The psychological damage this caused showed up in Finnish field reports. Soviet troops were refusing to move across open ground, officers unable to get their men to advance. An army that should have been rolling forward was frozen in place by the fear of a single man who might already have them in iron sights from 100 meters out, in a tree line that gave them nothing to shoot back at. The Soviets weren't going to let one farmer hold their army in place. They sent specialists to find him. The Soviet response reportedly started with counter-sniper teams. Trained marksmen given one job: find Häyhä and kill him. It was a reasonable escalation. A single rifleman shutting down an entire sector wasn't a nuisance. He was a strategic problem, and the logical answer to a sniper is another sniper. It didn't work. The same qualities that made Häyhä lethal made him nearly impossible to locate. Counter-snipers need something to work from: a muzzle flash, a vapor trail, a silhouette, a scope reflection. Häyhä gave them none of it. His profile was below the snowburn. His breath stayed cold. He fired once and went completely still. According to the accounts that came out of that campaign, several of the marksmen sent to find him didn't come back. Whether that's exactly right or rounded in the retelling, the Soviets clearly concluded that counter-snipers alone weren't going to solve this. So they moved to artillery. If they couldn't locate him precisely, they could shell the grid squares where the shots were estimated to originate and hope the math was close enough. Finnish accounts say Soviet guns reportedly shelled areas where they thought he was working, repeatedly through the winter. Häyhä survived by keeping low and changing position after each engagement, never settling into a pattern that would make the next estimated origin point predictable. The shells tore up the snow around him. He kept moving, kept returning to position, kept shooting. And the count kept climbing while the source stayed invisible. Finnish wartime records logged somewhere between 200 and 260 rifle kills, a chaplain's count and a later regimental count landing in different places, and the figure of over 500 most accounts cite today folds in his swarmy KP/31 submachine gun kills. Even the lower number, in roughly 100 days, has no real equivalent in documented military history. Other snipers across other wars have impressive records. None of them produced that rate, under those conditions, with those tools, in weather that was actively trying to kill everyone, regardless of which side they were on. What it meant operationally was this: the Soviets were pulling counter-sniper teams and artillery assets away from other tasks to chase one man on a secondary front, while their main push on the Karelian Isthmus was already grinding to a halt. They were fighting the war and hunting one farmer at the same time. The resource drain was real, and the man they were hunting kept not dying. On March 6, 1940, a round hit Häyhä in the lower left jaw. It was an explosive bullet, the kind counter-snipers used specifically to cause maximum damage on impact. It tore away most of his left cheek and jaw. Finnish soldiers near him pulled him out of the snow. Witnesses described his face as nearly unrecognizable. He was unconscious by the time they got him clear of the line. He stayed unconscious for about a week. On March 13, 1940, the Treaty of Moscow ceasefire took effect and the Winter War ended. Häyhä opened his eyes that same day. The war he'd spent 100 days fighting was finished while he lay in a field hospital, and he woke on the exact morning it stopped. He survived. His jaw was rebuilt across more than 25 surgeries over a 14-month recovery. He went home, went back to farming, bred hunting dogs, and by most accounts said very little about any of it for the rest of his life. He died on April 1, 2002, at 96 years old. The Soviets sent counter-snipers, artillery, and dedicated kill teams at one farmer in a snowdrift, and none of it worked until a single round found him in the last week of the war. What made him lethal wasn't myth or natural talent. It was the scope he left behind, the breath he kept cold, the snow he packed by hand, and the discipline to fire once and disappear back into the white. That was the method, but what an army of 500,000 learned to fear wasn't his aim. It was that they never saw him coming, a quiet farmer in the snow, already watching when the man beside you fell. For more breakdowns of the stories history almost forgot, make sure you're subscribed to the channel.